dimineața și bine ați venit la Energy Forward România, un eveniment organizat de Ziarul Financiar alături de ANG pe două teme extrem de relevante în contextul tranziției energetice, rolul captării și stocării carbonului și al combustibililor sustenabili în tranziția energetică. Încercăm să vedem alături de unii dintre cei mai buni specialiști din piață cum putem să trecem din zona de strategie care României lipsește deocamdată pe aceste două verticale, către partea de implementare. Eu sunt Roxana Petrescu, sunt senior editor la Ziarul Financiar. Am plăcerea de a deschide această conferință care, așa cum spuneam, își propune să abordeze două teme extrem de interesante în sectorul energetic local și pentru a intra mai în profunzimea acestor teme, o chem alături de mine pe Raluca Țintoiu, Head of Wholesale Banking and Deputy CEO ANG România, alături de care voi avea o discuție de introducere în engleză, pentru că știu că avem foarte mulți oaspeți străini în sală interesați de acest subiect. Raluca, please join me here. First of all, why did you as a bank want to have a conversation, a debate on such, let's say, emerging topics like CCS and sustainable fuels?
Obviously, as a bank, we are also looking into emerging technologies, and even though this topic has not reached maturity, I would say, it's not a mature business line in any of our countries. Some of them have maybe built more experience than others, and hopefully we'll learn more from our colleagues later today. We feel that it's really critical to start this discussion early on. Once these topics mature, obviously it becomes too late to learn about them. So we feel that is important for the country, for the industry, and also for the banking sector to start getting on this learning curve, also on these new and emerging themes.
What potential do you see for CCS and for sustainable fuels, let's say in Romania and for you as a bank? And also, which are the major challenges you see related to this kind of projects?
I think, as I was saying, the topic is still emerging. It's still at the beginning, so the potential will definitely be materializing over the next, say, 5 years. So far, it's true, we do not see very large projects, we do not see upcoming very large opportunities in this area. However, I think the opportunity comes from the need. The energy transition needs, the need of large industrial projects in the country of large scale that would require a balanced energy mix, and definitely in few years' time this will become a pretty hot topic, we are sure. Challenges, and probably we'll touch more about them going forward, obviously they relate to regulatory constraints, maybe some framework that needs to be developed further, a learning curve, and that's why we're all here, to bridge this gap. Yeah, I think not challenges that cannot be overcome, and I think that's why we're here today, and that's why we thought this would be a great way to kick off the discussion on this topic.
The discussion emerges in another challenging moment for Europe. We have another conflict that threatens our energy security, and of course I'm talking about what's happening in the Middle East. How do you see the dynamics of investment in energy changing? Is energy transition more important than ever? How do you see things evolving?
I think absolutely, and I think we are being faced with a few more areas that are critical, that become critical also in energy transition, the energy security. and affordability, really, since so far these have been topics not necessarily picked up as critical, as challenging. But at this point, onshoring as much as possible of energy sources and creating a diversified energy mix locally becomes more important than ever. And I think this crisis only emphasizes the need to accelerate thinking in this area.
We see that usually banks get involved in mature projects or where there is a support scheme going on, a PPA going on. How do you diversify your portfolio so that you can reach projects like CCS or sustainable fuels? Because we do not see any state schemes involved here, at least not in Romania.
I think state schemes are one way of supporting or to get banks to feel comfortable, but obviously there are several other mechanics that that can support banks' appetite. For instance, PPA and some other offtake contracts. Obviously, the quality of the sponsors, the quality of the investors that get involved in this project is a significant enhancement for the risk for banks. Some other support schemes also coming maybe from international financial institutions like guarantees, ECA guarantees, for instance, the export credit agencies that operate across the globe. So there is a mixture of credit risk enhancements, that's how we call them, and very much depends on the quality of the project itself, on the balanced risk profile, the conservative projections that are being built. So any type of, similar to any type of project financing in a way.
How does your portfolio in energy and energy transition projects in Romania developed last year, and which are your plans or targets for this year that we see it's quite challenging again?
We are proud to say we are a stable and supportive partner to Romanian energy companies, both in the traditional energy space and also in the renewable one. And we have, over the past years, and this year as well, been supporting our clients both on traditional lending and also in project financing for new renewable projects. And again, we are looking forward to look into projects in these new areas as well. Again, this is also a learning curve for us, and we would be happy to follow up on this meeting with further discussions, maybe in more details.
Okay, thank you very much, Raluca. Thank you for these words. Where we understand that energy transition is the name of the game, and we will see how CCS and sustainable fuels will help this journey that we must all engage in. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Before leaving you. I will say, and I will invite Henry Rushton here on stage. He is the Global Lead Sustainable Solutions Group, ING, and he is the moderator of the entire event with two very, very hot topics. Henry, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Roxana, very much. And actually, if I could just invite the rest of the panel to come up and join me. And whilst they do so, I will just give a bit of an introduction to myself. Thank you, Roxana and Raluca, very much for setting the scene. My name is Henry Rushton. I represent ING within our Sustainable Solutions Group, and I have a particular coverage within the energy sector covering low-carbon solutions and technologies. So I'm very happy to be joined on the panel. Welcome all. Thank you very much for joining. We have a large panel, 1 hour to discuss this topic. So we have a lot to get through. And I will introduce, if it's okay, each of you, but if I miss anything, then please feel free to add anything. I think just to set the scene very quickly, and I think Roxana and Raluca, you did it very well. from the Romanian perspective, I really see Romania as being one of the most scalable markets from an energy transition perspective. There is huge investment required really across the energy system, abundant hydrocarbons, which have traditionally powered the energy system, a very well-developed grid of networks, which is also ripe for decarbonisation and helping that decarbonisation, but also a base load of power provided by nuclear and hydropower, which is supporting, obviously, the increase in renewables, which has been very successfully rolled out, particularly on the solar side, but also from the wind. But today, we are here to discuss the molecule side, a subject close to my heart, and how we develop these low-carbon molecules in the context, yes, of climate priorities, but also, importantly, in terms of energy security for the region and affordability. And I think those three elements are certainly the approach that ING takes as well in terms of supporting our clients and financing this transition. So, if we turn to the panel, we are well represented from both the governmental level but also policy and research. We have a couple of representatives from the companies actually developing these projects or looking to develop these projects, as well as from the financing and legal side. So I think we have a good mixture of interests and knowledge here. Sorin Elise, the General Secretary of the Romanian Ministry of Energy, thank you for being here. We have Alina Arsani, who's Head of Energy Systems Department Energy Policy Group. Radu Căprău, member of the OMV Petroleum Executive Board, thank you for being here. And Cristian Calin, Director of Green Gas Programs and Decarbonisation Solutions at Delgaz. And then moving to the legal and financing side, Hein Tonayer, partner at Clifford Chance within the energy and infrastructure practice based in Amsterdam. And lastly, my colleague Erwin Nederkorn, the global head of the hydrocarbons and new energies group within ING. So, within that context and everything that's been discussed in the landscape within Romania, perhaps, Sorin, if I could turn to you first. What is the government prioritizing now in terms of demand-side instruments to develop these clean molecules? Also, as I said, in the context, yes, of decarbonisation and climate commitments, but also I think particularly we mentioned recent events in the Strait of Hormuz with the price shock there on the hydrocarbon side. Is that shifting the approach of the Romanian government in terms of demand-side support?
Good morning. We have a perspective which is offered by a national energy strategy as well as a national energy and climate change plan, which has a trajectory well until 2030. That was before the crisis. This crisis and the following ones would go along, at least this is my belief, confirming part of the decarbonization trends in terms of moving away from fossil fuels which are not in the control or under the remit of the member states, at least when we are talking about the European Union. However, this requires huge investment. I will start, and I think apart from CCS, I would say that there is a definite need to increase the clean molecule in transport, since we are one of the worst performer countries in terms of renewable uptake in transport sector, where year after year we have an increase of second-hand vehicles, and we have an increase actually of diesel and gasoline year on year. And the only way in which we are, let's say, fighting against this, it's basically biofuels, which do not cover the commitments of Romania in terms of this again target by 2030, which is not really achievable if you ask me. If I'm looking at this succession of crises and the way in which governments have put money in order to support this investment, at least from the public side, I would see that 2035 is much more feasible than 2030 to reach the current commitments that we have in 2030. Apart from that, the state has considered through the Ministry of Energy to support basically production of second generation biofuels in the sense of bioethanol and then sustainable aviation fuel coupled with HVO. That is something that would be locally produced, would be in a sense with feedstock which is largely locally produced, and that would fit in also in the sense of, or in the concept of the energy security, yes, on the dependence of related to oil and then oil products. I'm not quite sure if we've been discussing about support schemes. The only avenue that we see right now as a financing source is the modernization fund. We are actively engaging also with at government level to basically position the Ministry of Energy needs for the next multi-financial framework, the 2027-2034, in order to basically incentivize this part of fossil fuels consumption in transport. Apart from that, of course, there is this EV vehicle uptake, infrastructure development. There are other complementary measures. But if I'm looking at the overall picture, the only difference, the only real difference in terms of commitments would be to really decarbonize whatever we have as a fleet in terms of transport today on the roads. Couple of words also on CCS, if I'm allowed. We understand that there is a project which has been accepted for the Innovation Fund financing. We have supported that. We are supporters of any other project that basically involves, and I think Raluca mentioned earlier, the beneficiary, basically a cement factory or a company from the so-called hard-to-abate industries. But currently I do see the need for all the authorities to basically sit again on the table and forge a sort of a strategy in terms of CCS, which also relates to timing. The current 2030 target, I would dare to say it's not achievable. And we have to look and we have to discuss with the Commission in terms of Romania's share of million of tons to be deposited. And I would look at the best practices and say basically that offshore is more prone for CCS than the current onshore perspective, since we would expect a lot of things coming from public acceptance, infrastructure. So the time to develop this type of projects is at least around 6 to 7 years. And currently we do have a financing contract, but we will be talking about CCS, I would say 6 to 7, maybe 10 years from now, since these are very complex projects. And the part that the Ministry of Energy can do for the current project is to enable infrastructure to work and to serve, yes, the shipment of CO2 in whatever form, gaseous or liquid, and to put the regulatory framework in place in order to allow the stakeholders to really invest. And then if we will put the money, I would say that we need to complement whatever other EU funds are covering and discuss, because always I think we have discussed with the stakeholders at the Ministry of Energy to understand their needs and to really also for us to understand where the public money would best serve.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for setting that out. And from that I take that the Ministry of Energy, despite the short-term shocks to the energy markets that we've seen in recent years, actually you're sticking to the longer-term strategy as a recognition that it will take more time than perhaps is anticipated, but really the role in terms of supporting the infrastructure, looking first to Europe in terms of direct funding, but seeing if the Romanian government can also supplement that funding across both the molecules, but also on the carbon capture side. Alina, if I can turn to you from the perspective of EPG, Does that resonate with you? And what are you seeing in terms of the main bottlenecks in unlocking that capital to support this, this transition?
First of all, thank you for the invitation and congratulations for organizing this event. I represent the Energy Policy Group, an independent think tank, Romanian-based, focusing on energy policy and covering 30 full-time employees. Now, I would like to focus on three aspects, following your question and as a follow-up to what Sorin mentioned. Firstly, we appreciate the commitment to the strategic objectives, although a bit delayed considering the context. And regarding the context, so we have this European framework with a common objective, but high heterogeneity at the level of EU member states. And I refer to geographic scale, density population, institutional trust, also cooperation between trade unions and employers' organization, limited fiscal space for some member states, but not for others, and last but not least, the cost of capital. And I think that my colleague panelists, they can confirm that 2 percentage point difference in the cost of capital can decide whether a project will be developed or not. So within this framework and let's say a stable world, the tensions can be managed, but it is harder and harder considering the geopolitical fragmentation, tensions, and of course the input of the price volatilities in the equation. So this is to set a bit the scene. Then at the level of Romania, where do we stand in terms of biogas and biomethane? I would say that we have the feedstock, a potential for feedstock. At the same time, we have a very fragmented agricultural land, and the level of cooperation is not that high as it is in other Western or Northern countries. We have the natural gas network that it is prepared, and Mr. Călin will follow up on this as well. It is prepared for biogas and biomethane. We have the national targets, as Sorin mentioned, in the energy strategy, the NECP, and we also have a recent government emergency ordinance, the GEO9 from February, that present the framework for the development of biogas and biomethane in Romania. Still, we have at the same time a political crisis that has an impact on the predictability of the legislation and of course in general on investments. And I would say that we also have high level of capital costs at the level of Romania that is correlated with our budget deficit. Then I think I would say the last thing from my side in terms of clean molecules when looking at biogas, biomethane and hydrogen, because we have at least monitored these particular topics, we say that hydrogen should be used in hard-to-abate sectors. And we see the biogas and biomethane potential in the short term, especially considering the gas network that is prepared to take this type of molecules.
Thank you very much, Lina. And I'd like to come back to the topic in a bit on your views between the biomolecules and also hydrogen and the speed at which you expect that to develop. And also, I hear what you say about the cost of capital, and that's something that we can also get onto when we discuss a bit more on the financing side and how much of an impact that has. I think certainly when it comes to uncertainty of, should we say, regulation and how that will be enforced from our perspective, I think from a financing perspective, but also from an investor perspective, that's what really can kill projects at an early stage if there's not certainty and a clear path ahead in terms of support. If I can turn now to, let's say, the industrial parties at the tip of the spear in terms of developing these projects. Radu, can I ask, what is really driving the demand in Romania? Is it the regulation? Is it your commitments? And how are you addressing that in terms of OMV's actual response to this in terms of the projects being developed?
Bună dimineața! Morning. Yes, it works. Bună dimineața, good morning as well from my side. Thank you very much for the invitation on a very actual topic, a topic that represents a significant part of our strategy in our company. Waste to hydrocarbons or biofuels as being a very important element to fulfill the Romanian and let's say European ambitions that we want to reach in 2030 and later on. When you talk about the transportation, we need to understand as well the relevance of these molecules that could help in this transition, and we need to as well to look on when you talk about decarbonization of transportation, which part is very difficult to be realized with electromobility, and that's then we talk about heavy duty transportation, and then we talk about aviation business. It was mentioned before the HVO and SAF, HVO being I would call it sustainable biodiesel, while SAF being sustainable aviation fuel. It is a set part of our strategy. We took a decision of investing in such an installation in Petrobras refinery, producing 250,000 tons of HVO and SAF in 2028, so mid of 2028. That makes OMV Petrom and Petrobras refinery being the first producer in the region, southeastern and central Europe. I would even dare to say, till 2028. It is a significant commitment because we talk about 750 million euros to be invested in the next couple of years, and we are actually in full implementation. It's in full implementation for having that installation finalized in 2028. So, to your question, that what is really driving the demand, regulations, it's on a pole position, if I may say so. And if you look to the regulation frame, it's a very vast regulation frame. We talk RED 2, RED 3, RED 4 soon, most probably. Fuel Quality Directive, ETS, Refuel Europe, Maritime, methane emission, many. When you talk about transportation, the most tangible and with the biggest impact is, of course, the GHG emission reduction target for 2030, and as well the blending targets which we have to fulfill in 2030. For those, the biofuels and the waste to hydrocarbons are definitely a significant contributor. So this would be the first. Second, we are seeing selective support coming from corporate. Some companies are asking more and more for sustainable fuels, but as said, is relatively selective, and it's a group. It's a companies which are part of international groups, and they are following the corporate ambitions. While when you talk about end consumer, it's a limited support. So the people would like to be greener and to drive greener, but not really paying for that. So the price sensitiveness of the end consumer stays high. That would be a bit in a nutshell the demand-driven part. But when you talk a bit about the investment and about the challenges we have on bringing to life such initiatives, I think a very important challenge stays with the feedstock. With the feedstock, because we talk about a limited quantity of feedstock, and the more we get closer to the moment of fulfilling the target, and the more plants are going to be on stream, most probably the competition for this feedstock is going to be higher and higher, and stronger and stronger. So that's one. Then we talk about the technology. Many of the technologies, some of them are proven, but they are proven expensive, and obviously the biofuels are more expensive than the fossil products. That means that we need a financial support. We need the grants and or the support for the end consumers. An important aspect as well is related. It was mentioned affordability. How affordable is this transition? What is the cost of the transition? I mentioned before about the ETS. ETS 1, it's basically the European Traded Scheme, the allocation of the certificates for the CO2 emitted on production. But the ETS 2, it's supposed to come in the next years. It's about the CO2 burden for the cost that has to be transferred in the market for every single ton of fossil product. That was supposed to come in 2027, postponed for 2028. It will come with a cost for Romania approximately 1 RON per liter. 1 RON per liter, it's a lot. Most probably, Romania was not the only one country realizing that, and therefore was postponed for 2028. But there are other elements related to ETS2. I'm talking affordability. ETS2, for example, assumes that on production sites in Romania, we are a significant producer of oil and gas. Some of the gas used on production it's transformed in power which power goes again in production, and we would need to pay for this gas used on gas to power on site, ETS2. That's a double taxation. Some countries found solutions not to. Norway, Denmark, they are not paying. We need to find solutions as well as country to make sure that we do not make our production, Romanian production, not competitive versus other countries. So that's an important part. I mean, we need to transfer it, but we need to transfer it smartly, considering the social impact. And there is a new idea, which I'm not sure how much was discussed people are aware of it. It's about a kind of index that could be applied for that CO2 cost, while considering the purchase power of every single country. So indexed with a purchase power capability of every single country, and that would make affordable considering the purchase power that we have in Romania or in Bulgaria or in the neighboring countries versus the more developed country that could afford a bit more, most probably. So I think if I go in a nutshell, and it was mentioned, and I think I'm going to repeat every time when I have the opportunity, predictability is key. Missing predictability would make investments, put investments under scrutiny, or potentially stop other investments, because when you see changes in the regulations, you would stop decisions for going on investments. Let's make it affordable, and for that we need together with the authorities and regulators to make sure that it does consider the specific of the countries, and we wisely apply it in our own countries. And I think at the end of the day, it's a general effort, and it shouldn't be only steered or driven by the business or by the regulation. It's a joint effort that we need to address it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, and good that you get to make that message loud and clear with the minister here to hear that message. Radu, I'm sorry, because you put down the microphone, and I have one just more. I want to come to Christian in a second to talk about the gas networks, but I just was triggered a little bit by what you said about at the moment there being perhaps a lack of demand simply because of off-takers not willing to pay the price today. But do you see this, let's say on the biofuel side, do you see this turning into a market which is structurally short in terms of supply when these mandates actually start biting? ETS you mentioned coming in 2028. Do you see suddenly that market might shift quite quickly in terms of actually off-takers scrambling to fill enough of their off-take to satisfy mandates, essentially?
I think it's a legitimate question, because it's important to understand what are the projects that are meant to support these targets. And actually what we are seeing is that the number of projects being FID'd is increasing. That is meant to give the comfort of reaching or let's say fulfilling or getting closer to the ambition, to the volumes needed to reach the ambition in 2030. When you talk, for example, Refuel EU and SAF, we talk about these days is till 2029 is 2% blend. In 2030 it's a 6% with 5.3 SAF and 0.7 eSAF. On the eSAF or on the second generation fuels, we might see a challenge. When you talk about the SAF and HVO, we believe that both European production and the imports should help on satisfying the needs. That would work. I really think that the challenge will be bigger and bigger when we talk about the feedstock needed for this production, because it's limited. And now that you gave me the chance to talk a bit about that, I would refer to a thing that Romania is missing these days, the capacity to collect the waste oil. So we have the lowest capacity, and actually we do not have the structure, and there's the support of the state needed to create the structure and the incentive to collect this waste oil. We can transform this waste oil into sustainable aviation fuel. We can really avoid polluting waters. 1 liter of waste oil, it's polluting 1,000 liters of water. So we can avoid these things and being more friendly with the environment, not only from the sense of final used product, but as well from the sense that we are collecting this waste oil. So it is a lot to be done. And by the way, Romania would have the capacity of collecting 50,000 tons, and we are collecting today is maybe 15. So there's still a lot of space. There is, I think there are ways to do it, and there is a commitment of the industries. We represent one of these. We represent, for example, the company that does go on that road. We might have selectively challenged when you talk about the necessary volumes, especially from our perspective from today, from today's technology development is the e-fuels.
Okay, thank you very much. Christian, if I can turn to you, you've been waiting very patiently. From a network perspective, and I think moving from biofuels and synthetic fuels to biogas and potentially in the future synthetic gas, there's an established network. In terms of decarbonizing that network, it seems to be quite straightforward. You have the technological readiness to blend, I think, but is there also the commercial readiness? How do you see it in terms of decarbonizing the gas networks within Romania?
So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I'm glad to be here to share key aspects in this field. So, thank you for the question. I'm an infrastructure guy. So, gas infrastructure, from my perspective, is a key enabler, a strategic asset in the decarbonization process. So, it's a very important element in the value chain of energetic transition. Why? There are few arguments. Gas infrastructure is already prepared for biomethane. And also, most of the European studies and US studies said that even for hydrogen is prepared, especially polyethylene grid and steel as well. If we discuss about distribution grid, that means, let's say, according to European standards, below 16 bar, no really key problems for, let's say, technical problem like hydrogen embrittlement. So, gas infrastructure is connecting, it's a bridge between biomethane, which can deliver now, and hydrogen, which can deliver later. From my perspective, we have in Romania more than 75,000 kilometers of gas grid, including transmission grid, and at European level, European Union, there are 2 million kilometers of distribution grid, only distribution. All this grid is directly connected to the clients, industrial clients, mobility, and households. So that's why I consider that it's a key enabler to support sector coupling and to support also circular economy. On the other hand, regarding the molecules, I think the problem is not how fast we scale up the molecules. The problem is how fast we can reduce the barriers which today stop the demand and also the investing process. Because we have strategy, we have targets, we have a regulatory framework, but we can see not too much demand. Why? So investors are not very interested to put money there. So there are some explanations. Something happens, and from my perspective, I see some barriers. One of this barrier, it's, let's say, maybe regulatory framework from European level, it's a little bit ahead the market. So we have a market in the initial phase. Regulatory, it's for the mature markets, and I am related here to some restrictions coming from European level. For example, for hydrogen, it's additionality principle, it's temporality principle, it's geographic correlation principles. So all these principles are very normal to be in the mature market. But now in the initial market at European level, I think can be a barrier. So that's why I think a recalibration strategy at European level is needed according to the clients, to the industry, mobility. Otherwise, I cannot see how the demand will increase. For example, in Romania, the market is very poor. Biomethane will start, but hydrogen, it's a little bit behind. Even in Europe, we can see this. Another, let's say, barrier, it's the chicken-egg dilemma. So industry said, I need competitive price. Investor said, I need long-term contracts first. So how can solve this? A solution can be mechanisms for support the industry. As Sorin said, modernization fund programs and other kind of funds to start this market. In most of the European countries, this market starts with subsidies. We have 20 years experience in Germany for biomethane production, in France as well, Italy. So biomethane, it's completely compatible with our grid. It's methane, not else. Hydrogen, it's a little bit different, but all the pilot projects, even our pilot project, first pilot of blending in Romania, done in 2023, with 23% of hydrogen in natural gas in the current grid, steel, polyethylene, and current appliances, very old and new, demonstrated that everything is possible without any technical problems and without any modification of the appliance system. So we can do this, but at the beginning we need help. The industry, the end user need help to make it happen. Another opportunity of the gas infrastructure is the conversion cost. Maybe we are too focused to build new hydrogen pipelines dedicated and not to focus to repurpose what we have. As I said, mostly compatible with hydrogen. We don't speak about biomethane because it's methane. We don't forget to e-methane as well. It's an opportunity for the next future. It's capture CO2 and green hydrogen through Sabatier technology. We know it from decades. So a Marco gas study done in 2023 proved us that the cost to repurpose the current gas grid, doesn't matter transmission or distribution, it's significantly cheaper than to build a new dedicated pipelines. Of course, we need also dedicated pipelines for hydrogen valleys, yes, clusters which connect production, transport and use. But as I mentioned, our grid, infrastructure, gas grid is already connected to the customers. And a big advantage of this grid is can transport high capacity, low risk, in short time, and let's say in comparison with other transport solutions, transporting through the pipelines is completely superior as advantages. So, as a conclusion, we can have a strategy, but we don't need a perfect strategy. We had to make it happen, to work on it, to find solution to implement this strategy, even in Romania. But now we have to start to relax the restrictions, which today the demand it's stopped, and the investment as well.
Thank you very much, Christian. And you wouldn't be the first person to say that the EU regulation is perhaps overly complex. I know policy experts within the European Commission who struggle to explain their own policy. So that's something that is well recognized. And as you say, there will need to be subsidies to support that. But I certainly that resonates a lot with what I see as well, is that let's focus on what we can do now pragmatically rather than trying to make things perfect, because ultimately we should be using the infrastructure that we have to achieve the initial stages of decarbonisation, particularly with the biogas blending. You mentioned the difficulty again with offtake and customers willing to pay. If we can move now, let's say, to the financing and legal side, Hein, you've obviously been quite closely involved in a number of these projects at the forefront, particularly on the SAF side. I'm interested to hear from you and your experience what you see really helping to unlock on a contractual level, particularly on the offtake side, and trying to get some of these projects off the ground and getting, let's say, investors and financiers, but also off-takers close together so that we can move these projects towards FID.
Yeah, thanks, Henry. Does it work? Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Indeed, and I think what I want to share with you is a more bottom-up approach. And so what we've now heard so far is more top-down. Regulatory environment is crucial. And I very much concur, by the way, with your proposal on short-term subsidies or support, because I think that's one of the key issues for entering the market. And that experience is derived from mainly advising Sky Energy for 6.5 years on a daily basis to reach financial close. First greenfield project financing, HEFA technology, where your institution played a vital role, by the way. But also projects in Pakistan, one closed in France, Uruguay, Brazil, and we do that from a team partly based in Amsterdam. So a little bit of experience there. If you look at the project and those challenges you mentioned, we structured like, okay, there's two more top-down elements, namely regulations and local permitting. And then you move down to a project level where you easily come to feedstock, offtake, and EPC, which is short for construction contracts. On the regulatory element, yeah, I'm not smiling, but it is a lawyer's paradise in a way, because nobody actually knows what they want to do. And there's very clever people in Brussels and everywhere who think the world is perfect. And we all know that's the enemy of the good. So, although with all the good intentions, I think we see these obstacles, but then we're kind of stuck and bound by our own rules, where primarily in my project, state aid is very relevant. So we're all very not comfortable to kind of support, and then it's illegal state aid. Whilst in the current world and outside Europe, is it a level playing field? I think that's a political statement. I try to refrain from it, by the way, sorry. But moving then to a more project level challenge is the permitting. And that's where also local governments can play a role with giving the comfort and the assurance for developers that permits will be issued on a proper basis, because the technique goes fast and you need to change the permit probably once or twice. And then it helps just to have a proper framework with speed and not being hijacked by one neighbor, which is the NIMBY, not in my backyard syndrome. Luckily, this is more heavy industry, but it still applies to some of the projects we see. So leaving those elements aside for now, the feedstock, offtake, but also EPC are all directly linked, especially if you attract financing from external parties, project financing, but also the more sophisticated investors, they look at our return on investment. So before they put in 200-300 million as equity, they want to be pretty certain, A, it will be built on time, according to specs. If you go out to the market to a contractor for a road or a tunnel, I mean, that's quite easy peasy. I mean, no, everybody did it. If you go out, get me a SAF plant, that's actually also pretty easy for 90%, because oil and gas industry is there for ages. It's just a new technology which makes it more tricky, and that's the licensing of either the HEFA or HVO units, so the companies like Topsoe, ARA, etc. And you want, as a bank, an investor, to be certain that everything is with one party and the liability is, you have recourse to those parties. But it also should meet the specs, the feedstock. So you need to know what type of feedstock you need to put in, but also and that relates to the offtake profile. And we have seen one solution in the market where there was a pre-treatment unit being built in, just to get a better and a more broad source of feedstock in to minimize or at least mitigate the risk of competing for the same feedstock. And I think in Brazil we saw also, or Uruguay, that if the SAF was not there, the market wasn't there, you could switch the plant to biodiesel. So you have a plan B. So I think that's what we've seen. Feedstock, if investors and banks want to see long-term contracts, they're not there yet. And there's more competition. So you need to come up with a strategy. And the same applies actually to offtake. So of course, offtake is where people look at, because that's where the cash is coming in. Old style project finance. So investment grade, reputation, but the offtake contract, I'll say a little bit about that, and then you can cut me off on those particular negotiations. That is very important. So if you compare it also to other industries, which I like to do with offshore wind, etc., you now see PPA blocks or aggregators of PPA inflow. That's maybe something also for the SAF market. We have advised, I negotiated the KLM offtake contract, which is a 15-year take-or-pay contract. I think that is the holy grail in project finance. It was a hell of a job, because an airline is used to buy on the spot and try to convince those people that they need to lock themselves in for 15 years.
Do you think that, just on that contract alone, do you think that KLM were willing to enter into a 15-year contract simply because it's a relatively small portion of their overall supply, or is it because they want to use it for marketing? I mean, you rightly say that you're moving from a market that's inherently short-term to one of a 15-year contract. So what led to that?
But soft and hard arguments, I would say. The soft is, of course, sustainability targets, and the profile of it's the blue airline anyway. It's in the brand. They had a sliver of equity in Sky Energy as well, so that was also why they did it. They also are betting on the market in a way that the prices go up. So there's a kind of a cap collar structure. And now they may overpay, but mind you, there's a construction period and the market will evolve. But provided refuel is there to stay, and the penalties of twice the delta compared to Jet A are indeed imposed, which is to be seen, I think they have a head start, because 2030 is rapidly nearing and there's no capacity. So how will we go about that, the penalties? So that's one of those are the key elements. And in that contract, it was extremely difficult to convince them that if they want to, for instance, terminate for convenience, they need to repay the debt. And that's kind of that's a bit, because otherwise, why would we just build you a plant for almost $1 billion? And if you terminate after 2 years, we should take the pain. But so there's pros and cons there. If you talk about multiple off-takers, what we see now in the market is we probably won't get another 15-year for the full off-take. We have also seen examples in Sweden with the Green Steel project, where there was a lot of off-take, very fragmented, only short tenors, which was then the other side of the spectrum, which didn't fly. So it's somewhere in the middle. I would see the market land on 7-8 years. And also the financing terms, probably like battery storage with mini perms, 5 to 7 years instead of 15-year door-to-door.
Yeah.
Change in law, and then I'll skip further. I mean, and that's also coming back to the topic of today. Change in law clauses are extremely scary and relevant and important. And they all start with, what is the change in law? Is the interest of the parties indeed affected? And how do you deal with it? You can't say, okay, there's a change in law, I terminate, because a lot of parties are constructing a very expensive plant for you. So you need to not terminate instantly, and really think about structuring that. We have a lot of examples there, but I'll leave it for that for now.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I mean, I must say I'm starting to feel very positive and upbeat about this whole development of clean molecules. And I think we started with obviously, well, as you were saying, Soren, a sort of a stable regulatory environment from the industrial perspective. We've got, well, a grid that's ready to take the clean molecules and blend in, and OMV actually developing these projects to meet the demand. And it seems clear to me, at least, Hein, that we have the tools there to get round those last remaining problems in terms of getting these projects to FID contractually.
The chicken and egg is what we live for as lawyers. So we are able to structure that. But it does require a lot of effort, but mostly not just good lawyers and bankers, etc. People who are driving the process with people skills. Because you need to have 9 out of 10 is not good enough. All 10 parties need to have something to gain. But not the maximum gain, otherwise you don't have the project. So if you are able to explain to people what you're doing and why you need each other and still give them something to win, I think that is, in my experience, all the projects I did in the last 23 years, the key driver. Yeah.
No, I would completely agree. And you mentioned, obviously, the KLM SAF project, which had the long-term offtake contract. You mentioned it's a different sector, but the green steel project with shorter, let's say 5 to 7 year contracts. Although that project, I know it has its own difficulties, but actually did reach FID. And there, as you were alluding to, there are different elements in terms of more equity that can come in to get, from a lending perspective, banks comfortable. Owen, if I can turn to you, and please don't bring the mood down. I'm sure you won't. I often hear it said that there's no shortage of capital for clean molecules, only a shortage of good projects to bank. But if I listen to what Hein's saying, it's really about bringing parties together and making sure that it's not 9 out of 10, but it's 10 out of 10 in terms of the risk sharing. Is that correct? And is that what you see in terms of getting these projects from a bankability perspective to FID?
Yeah, I think so, Henry, and obviously we discussed this a lot. But maybe for the wider picture, and Raluca already alluded to it in her introduction, right? So the whole energy transition, it's a combination of electrons, right, and molecules. On the electron side, obviously, the production of that, I think that has become a mature market. And that's also where ING has invested a lot. And last year we committed almost 10 billion of new commitments in the renewable energy space, where indeed the key challenges there are indeed net congestion and intermittency of the production sources. So, but if you then go to the molecule side, what we discussing here, indeed, there's a lot about indeed infrastructure on one hand, and I'm actually everybody always talks about decarbonization, but I actually on the molecule side I prefer the term defossilization, because that's what it is about. It's about the circular economy, right, and basically use the C atoms, if you like, right, which are already there, rather than indeed, produce more. The big challenge is indeed that we have to compete, on the sustainable molecules with a highly efficient fossil industry. And that is, I think, the key issue. We have become, of course, a bit spoiled that we have really cheap energy from these fossil sources. So, but to mention a few positive things. You mentioned indeed biomethane. I think we as ING are also very proud that we have been taking a step forward in this, and in the last 24 months or so have been almost invested 1 billion in globally in this space of new commitments. That is across Europe, and we're also looking in Romania now to the first projects. And I think what is also helping to say a positive thing about indeed the regulation is that the green certificates can travel. So I think that is also here that if indeed biomethane is here produced, you can monetize the green certificates elsewhere. So and that also basically ties into the purchasing power component. That in that way, you can make the system more efficient. And obviously, indeed, it is very useful to use the infrastructure which is already there to basically bring the molecules to the market. So indeed, if we look what are we doing as ING on the sustainable molecule side, that's indeed mainly biomethane. That's where we see the most traction. In addition to indeed the SAF and the HVO, although we have also supported the big corporates who are active in this field. Because it's not kind of a really new area, but it is in that sense it's new for the project financing market, where indeed, as Hein also alluded to, with the challenges on the technology side, and when you look at bankability, I think there's one key element for bankers, and that's predictability indeed of cash flows, especially if you look at project financing. Where indeed, you mentioned airlines, but actually, airlines, maybe, they commit to the volumes and the prices, but airlines are not the most creditworthy entities in this world. So actually what we would have preferred is that the big energy companies, the Shells, Exxons, and the BPs of this world, they are actually also the mandated parties, but they seem to be sitting a little bit on the sidelines and waiting and seeing what will happen. And indeed, much focus indeed on the return on equity. And I think that is also the reason that, not too long ago, indeed, both Shell and BP, they cancelled their SAF projects in the Netherlands. But I think that is also because they didn't see the market yet, right? So I think there is at this point in time, believe it or not, but there is an oversupply in a way if you compare to the mandated levels on SAF. By yourself that is. So I think, they're postponing their investments until they see the prices go up. So indeed, also in order to justify their investments. And, you can also not blame these parties, right? So I think it is, it's also not sustainable to invest in projects where you cannot make a return. So, and I think that is indeed for the system, in its entirety, including governments and so on, to bridge, and when it then comes to the detail of a project financing, I think we can find solutions there, and to structure it in the right way. But I think the key challenge is on the offtake. We see the offtake, the longer term commitments from creditworthy parties in order to kind of grow this business. That's the lacking part. So
Thank you very much, Owen. I'm just looking at my colleague Sylvia because I'm conscious we've got a few minutes left. I would like just to make sure that if we have any questions from the audience, we get an opportunity. I think that would be good. We already see two, so that's good. Perhaps then we take a question and then move over there. But thank you very much.
Hi. Is it working? Yeah, it is. Vlad Stoicescu, Sustainable Fuels Association. The question is pretty clear for the whole panel because we've discussed environmental affairs and financial affairs, but we haven't discussed strategy-wise because SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel, it's written in the law. It's basically an anti-tankering law. It's not for the environment, it's more for finances and for competitiveness. So, considering that we don't have natural resources in Europe, our aviation sector was basically killed in competitive-wise. Aren't we supposed to focus on the benefits of having our own fuel source and maybe involving trade as an incentive for this whole scheme? And guarantees of origin are a thing that haven't been discussed at the table. Well, biomethane guarantees of origin are trading 5 times the cost of renewable energy today. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll take a first shot on that one. I think if you look at the current geopolitical circumstances, the Strait of Hormuz is still closed-ish, and you see a stronger focus on, okay, how can we produce our own supplies, our own stuff. I think it will not easily be enough, but it will help. Now you see already it helps because of the business cases of new projects, because the price gap is smaller. That's just one of those happy accidents, I would say. of Bob would say. But then, and what we also see is in the defense industry and sector that governments are now thinking, okay, what happens? I need to have my own supply to fly my aircraft or drones, whatever they need. So it's a boost. So I agree with your recommendation to kind of focus also more on own production where we can to that extent.
Yeah, and I think it becomes a security of supply issue, as you're saying, because yes, the price today is higher, but unfortunately these long-term contracts or these long-term projects don't get decided on the price of oil today. Indeed. I don't know whether anyone else from the panel wants to add it to that. It seems like there are knowing nods from the rest of the panel anyway. I think, well, yeah, I think the gentleman here, and then we move on to the other side of the room. Thank you.
Saude? Okay. Good morning, everybody. And I want to congratulate ING for this discussion, this event. I'm Lucian Mățu. I'm representing AB Energy Romania. AB Energy is a part of Grupo AB, important, one of the biggest players in the biogas, biomethane industry, delivering turnkey solutions, and we are operating almost 20 power plants that we delivered in the last 40 years. In Romania, mainly gas to power and biogas. I have a question for Mr. Elisei, because there is an increasing interest on the biomethane, and I know that important step was done this year by introducing biomethane in the legislation. So at least for the moment, it is very important. But somehow, when it comes to zootechnical sector and the biomethane, everybody is expecting subsidies, grants, in order to make these projects viable. And also there is a discussion about the feed-in tariffs, which we have examples, that is what mentioned from Italy, from France. And I was wondering if you can share with us a perspective, if this we should be, at least maybe you will give us good news that in the next future, this year or next year, how close we are to let's say, to speak also about this for Romanian market. Thank you.
Just to be very brief, because at some point we are at the Ministry of Energy begin to feel like at the Ministry of Finance in terms of subsidies. We have to consider where we can take money from, and that is mainly modernization fund and whatever comes 2027, 2034. That is why we were looking at the strategic directions in which, from our perspective and looking at strategy and directions, we will try to put money in different pots. It is also important for all the stakeholders to be in that discussions where structural funds will be moved in the next 7 years, because given the current fiscal space, I would say that we are not going to be in a position very soon to offer feed-in tariffs. However, we will consider what we promised in the ordinance in the sense of incentivizing injection into the grid to facilitate at least the biomethane being there in the infrastructure. Second, I think September or October, I'm trying to be very optimistic, and we are also working hard on parallel streams to have the guarantees of origin regulation issued by the authority. However, words like geos on biomethane trade 4 or 5 times higher than the price of gas, this is not something that the government will like, believe me, because it goes to the customers. It goes also to what Radu says. Yes, we might have green products, but they are so expensive that the customer doesn't afford and doesn't really uptake. So this is something that we will also try to sit on the experience and lessons learned of the billions of euros that entered the renewable energy generation, to understand or to see right now that I have PPAs on renewables which go to 80 or 90 euro per megawatt. And this, from a certain perspective, believe me, it's not acceptable. We've been putting grants, We've been putting a lot of financing just to understand that 90 euro it's the price of the fossil fuels at which renewables are selling PPA to end users. If it's a matter of the balancing market, if it's a matter of, you know, shifting some of the regulations, fine-tuning, trying to, you know, facilitate, maybe offer financial instruments to, or collaterals for end customers to uptake PPA, this is something that we can always discuss. But always, in terms of affordability, and this is what we are also discussing, at least myself with several stakeholders, if at some point the subsidy, whatever public support is given is somehow over what it should be, sooner or later the state will react. And this has happened on the green certificate, so we need to be very, what I'm trying to say in the end, when we design the state aid, everybody should be involved. We should decide whatever public money goes into, but keeping a balance between the beneficiary and then the beneficiary of the state aid and then the end user.
Yeah, but maybe I think I have also some good news here to bring, that indeed the European mandate, for the blending mandate, that there are parties within Europe who are willing to enter into long-term contracts for biomethane. So I'm also happy, you know, to introduce you to parts, but it's the, you know, large utilities, but also, you know, large oil and gas companies. So if you decide to indeed to invest to convert, you know, your biogas plants into biomethane plants and insert it in the grid, then I think, you know, you don't need, let's say, the local subsidies, but you can also basically have a viable investment based on these off-take contracts, which are available. I think the certificate element, to be honest, I think that is closed, that so that indeed it is fully recognized that what you produce here in Romania, you can indeed the certificates monetize in Europe. But I think that would be a good solution. And the countries who have decided to make subsidies available and have feed-in tariffs, they only have done so because they want to stimulate indeed the let's say the industrialization of biomethane for a certain period of time to speed it really up. But I think, you know, the mandate is already helping a lot there. Also, if you see, let's say, the interest from the large utilities and international oil companies to basically fulfill the mandate which has been there in the EU.
Thanks, Erwin. I think we have time for another question, yeah.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dragostin Cătălin, and I'm very happy to have the chance to attend this very interesting, I would say, strategic discussion. And I will take the opportunity to have the esteemed panelists here to ask a couple of questions to enlighten everybody. So, as we know, all of us, RED Directive, EU RED Directive, clearly states that the biofuels, being it advanced or as part A of the directive, Annex 9 Directive EU, or Part B, are dictated by the feedstock. So we can produce advanced biofuel from one feedstock, Part A, and another biofuel, not advanced, from Part B. In this line, I would like everybody to think that Romania, this year, 25-26, has cultivated 800,000 hectares of rapeseed. 800,000 hectares of rapeseed, which is about 10% of, roughly, about the agricultural land of Romania. But also the books say that we should think in terms of efficiency of the land cultivated. Efficiency, I mean energy efficiency and emission reduction. From this angle, if we look at the efficiency of the land cultivated, we see that the rapeseed is a certain level of energy and emission reduction. And other cultivations, other cultures, other plantations will reach about 5 times, on average, efficiency, higher efficiency, and emission reduction by about twice that feedstock. So from this angle, I would rather ask a question. Is it wise to produce so much today, which is good, to produce HVO and SAF, sustainable air fuel, from part B, which is collecting used cooking oil, rapeseed oils, and etc., or to choose a different cultivation which provides more energy efficiency and more or less emissions, by far less emissions. Doing HVO and hydrogenated vegetable oil and SAF from this part B feedstock, it is good, but not impressive. So that's the thing which I would like the opinion of the esteemed panelists. The final point is the following. With different cultivation, sugar and alcohol made, we can produce both biofuel, ethanol, and SAF, by far superior quality than the other option. So I would welcome any comment, if any.
Yeah. Well, I don't know whether anyone from the panel wants to take this. Certainly, thank you.
Thank you very, very much for the question. Without saying that I'm any specialist in agriculture, to be honest, I have to say that there is actually a pool there of materials that could be considered as feedstock for the HVO SAF. And I will make reference to a very important part that would allow the optimization in the whole process of utilizing different types of feedstocks. And this is the pretreatment unit that you have mentioned before, because they're beyond the traditional one. You can have, as well, as I mentioned before, the waste or the used cooking oil, but animal fat as well could be a good feedstock if you have the pretreatment unit. And there are not so many pretreatment units, or let's say facilities that would take such a feedstock. Where Romania is pretty long on that feedstock and is exporting it in other European countries, we could utilize it in Romania. Well, I think as well that we need to mention the part of the agricultural area of Romania which is not today used, and I think there is opportunity for Romania has definitely the advantage of having a strong agricultural sector, but still we know that there is land which is still not it's not into the agricultural segment used, so then it's unutilized. So again, without being a specialist in all the energetic part of or let's say the details of every single feedstock, I think that we have a large pool, so both A and B, they are giving opportunities to go for the first generation, second generation production, and then at the end of the day, the optimization is the one that is going to drive the decisions of the companies. And as well, a very important element in the whole process is the pretreatment unit, which gives opportunity to process a very, very large number of feedstocks and not without being focused on a single one. Yeah?
To conclude, asking the question is also giving the answer, but I think, is it wise? Yes, for now, because we just need it. But if you look at the UK CEF mandate, for instance, there's a cap on HEFA, which actually means don't use all the feedstock, and they support and stimulate eSAF more. So, in a way, for me, it's also temporarily, in a way, and not focus on one feedstock.
Okay, I think we have just for a question, and then we'll.
The point I'm trying to make is much more simple, and I'm not talking about whatever OMV is doing. Changing the feedstock for the alcohol and sugar and processing for part A, biofuels, advanced biofuels, we will produce sugar, which we are importing, €500 million per year. We are producing wheat, which also is imported, a lot of wheat, but it is a very special wheat, gluten-free. And then we will produce SAF and bioethanol. But in case of rapeseed, we produce rapeseed. The end of story. So that's the efficiency, economic efficiency and energy efficiency compared with the other thing. So I'm not talking and not interested in what OMV is doing. I'm interested in what Romania can do.
No, but I think maybe for me, I thank you for the question. And to be honest, I love it because I think this is the fundamental kind of issue of the whole energy transition. We need a much more systemic way of looking at things. And this is one example of it. But I absolutely like the issue, and that, and Zoran mentioned, indeed, we almost look like the Ministry of Finance. Also, that indeed, from government's perspective, they need, to sit back and say maybe, how we are organized now is not actually fit for purpose to tackle the issue of the energy transition. So, but thank you for the question, and
maybe just one
Henry.
more thought. Just one more thought. I think it's important to recognize that we need all possible technologies and solutions to reach our targets in 2030, because actually as Sorin was mentioning it earlier, he believes that it's going to be a very challenging target to be reached in 2030. So we need all possible technologies and solutions. Some of them are more mature, some of them are less mature. On this particular one, we are studying it, the efficiency. I mean, if you do ethanol and then afterwards using the residues for the e-ethanol. But it is definitely, from our point of view, the need for all technologies to contribute to the targets we need to reach in 2030.
Thank you, Radu, and thank you, Erwin. As always, unfortunately, time has been our biggest enemy. I feel like there are many, many more questions I would like to ask as well. But we have run out of time. I would just like to say a big thank you to the audience for your attention and also for your interested questions. Thank you very much. And a special thanks to each and every one of the panelists. I really appreciate your insights. It's been very interesting, so thank you very much. I think we take a short break, 10 minutes apparently, and then we move to the next panel. Thank you very much. carbon capture and what is needed to scale the carbon management system in Romania and the wider region. I think based on the first panel, we will have a lot to get through in this panel, so thank you very much for all of your attention. I will just go straight into the introductions and then we can go into the panel itself. So we have a bit of a change to the program. So from UNRWA we now have Leonard Florea, specialist at the National Energy Regulatory Authority. Thank you very much for filling in at the last minute, Leonard, that's much appreciated. Next we have Ramona Rusu, CEO of Dacian Petroleum. Thank you for being here. Claudiu Micu from the gas marketing manager, the gas marketing manager from Black Sea Oil and Gas Energy. Thank you very much. Andreea Shishman from Clifford Chance, based in Bucharest office. And lastly, my colleague Peter Paul Ecclescott, who is the global lead for low carbon solutions in ING and also is in the lead on our carbon capture, utilization and storage unit within ING. So thank you all very much for being here. If I may, Leonard, just to set the scene a little bit, in terms of, from a regulatory perspective, it's a tricky question. If it was tricky on the low carbon molecules, I think it's even more tricky on the carbon management and the regulation required there. So perhaps an open question to you, from your vantage point, what are the material gaps in terms of the framework today and what's required to really sort of get this moving?
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for this invitation and opportunity to share some information about the perspective of National Regulatory Authority. It's tricky questions because it's obviously I have major obstacles in generally speaking, but I'm not sure it's main obstacles. It's probably it's necessary major effort from authorities. Principle is necessary to improve primary law because secondary legislation established by NRI is based on primary law. It's necessary to improve ordinance, government ordinance 64 by 2011, because we are consider that some definition are missing, and after that it's important to see some separate of activities, because capture is one activity, transport is another activity, and storage is another activity. This is the main important difference from actually law. In other perspective, the transport and the storage infrastructure is missing now. It's necessary some efforts from stakeholders that will must to improve the primary legislation. And for that, it's important to see how to design technical norms, because technical norms, it's important to design, to execution, and put in place the pipeline of transport, carbon dioxide.
Yep.
This is the major problem. We have a similar situation with that in the law 123 by 2012, maybe 238 by 2004. where some information about the operator of transport or maybe system of transport could be similar designed into new law. Mm-hmm. This is the point. About some information and maybe efforts, it's to establish tariff methodology. It's important to have similar with network for natural gas or maybe oil network, such RAB. This is the point. But for the future, it's important to have maybe CFD. CFD for carbon. In the previous year, because the CFD will be established by government. Yeah. And we'll see.
Well, I mean, just before we move on to Ramona, I'm just interested to know, because obviously in other parts of Europe, should we say, we've seen quite well developed now systems of supporting carbon capture in the UK or the Netherlands, for example, where we've seen projects. How much are you looking to other regions? I mean, it seems in a way clear that there are certain mechanisms and certain schemes that work very well at a cost. How much are you looking to these other systems of support to replicate in Romania, or is that not the way that it's looked at from a regulatory perspective?
It's difficult to answer because the Romania has a specific geographic
yep, sure.
areas. It's all the grids are private. Onshore, it's difficult to build now because it's necessary to expropriate some grids, or maybe it's necessary to authorization from local authorities. This is the point. And replicate national system for carbon dioxide could be, but demand, it's necessary, it's enough to design a national system. This is the question which remain.
Yeah, okay.
But could be.
Thank you. Ramona, is that something that, from your perspective, Dacian Petroleum, do you recognize that? Do you see that this is very regionally specific? And from your perspective, do you see it developing from beyond these sort of individual hubs, cement lime hubs with carbon capture? Or do you see this moving towards the sort of cluster approach as we've seen in other regions?
First of all, thank you for inviting me today here. It is a pleasure to be with you here and to contribute and to see many colleagues from the industry. For us, maybe the perspective is a little bit different. And we think that carbon storage can be like an infrastructure project. We don't have to see individual project. Maybe we can see like entire channel for the transportation of CO2, entire hubs for carbon storage, and maybe also source of carbon capture to be interconnected, very efficient. So yes, it's true. It's not an easy project to go forward. It requires a lot of technical expertise. It requires a lot of complexity from legislative point of view, and it requires a lot of complexity in the relation between different kind of authority. It's not something simple to do it, but there are some steps done already in this direction. We are working together with other companies in the industry, and we have a lot of progress in this direction, and we are contributing actively to the legislation. It's true, I agree with Mr. Florea that it's not easy to do it, but if we are looking to the other country around us, if we are looking to the industry, to the strategy, European strategy, which is interconnected with the industrial strategy, it's not something that will be separated, it's something that we must do it. It's not something that we can think if we want to do it. This is...
Okay, so you, I mean, not today, and it's difficult, but you definitely envisage an integrated infrastructure approach.
Yes, for sure will be. I think that Romania, it's naturally built for different kind of technology. It's not only for renewable, it's for carbon storage. We have today in the meeting room a lot of people doing different kind of project in different kind of industry. I think we are lucky from this point of view, having access to different kind of technology. We only need to focus to think which is the best strategy for our country and to go forward.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Claudia, if I could move to you, and particularly given your perspective and your background on the gas marketing side, we discussed in the previous panel the changing market, should we say. We mentioned the airline industry moving from short-term contracting to long-term contracting, and to the extent that was possible. Are you able to share any insights from your perspective of what you see and how you see the direction of travel for these contracts, whether it's whether you see a role for aggregator shipper roles, or whether there's particular contracting issues that you would like to identify that need to be ironed out?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Kerry. First of all, thank you again for having me here today, and I would like to take this opportunity to provide you an overview actually on our projects on CCS, because in Black Sea Oil and Gas, as you know, we are a offshore gas producer, so you can imagine that we have this amazing infrastructure onshore and offshore, and we strongly believe that it's a waste to not use it after the reservoir will end. Therefore, you know, the need to analyze a CCS project and its potential based on our infrastructure somehow came natural to us. And in this respect, we have conducted various studies to assess technically and commercially the viability and feasibility of this kind of project. And I can say that the project itself, from commercial point of view, is viable, but one key aspect which needs to be treated and let's say cater in the market itself, it's the long-term agreement, because essentially this is one key which actually makes, let's say, a CCS project investable on the whole value chain of this kind of project. So I believe that, you know, the market itself, the logic of the CO2 market should resemble to any let's say infrastructure-based commodity market, and should be driven by demand and supply. In this case, the demand it's representing by the emitters. So the emitters of the CO2 actually create the demand, and in return, let's say the CO2 and the storage operators are providing the infrastructure needed for that CO2. So our project is quite straightforward in this sense. I mean, we take the CO2 at the flange, and we move the CO2 and transport the CO2 to our, let's say, onshore facilities. Although, like Leonard mentioned, you know, in our project, the shipper role, it's on our behalf, although it's not stress tested, let's say, against the regulation, because they are not in place right now. And then, transported through sent through the offshore pipeline through the reservoir, you know, for storage. What we have discovered from the beginning is that the proximity between the emitters and the storage providers is one key aspect to actually make or break a CCS project. So we strongly believe that these two parts of the story needs to work together, and of course they are let's say linked through a bridge, which is the long-term agreement.
Yeah.
Now, of course, this long-term agreement should be based on I don't know, as I see it, on let's say a tolling fee. And moving forward on this line, the conundrum here is just to agree the fee and the duration of the contract between the two parties. That being said, landing on these two correctly has the potential to unlock and make a project investable for the storage operators, but in the same time to be somehow commercial incentive for the emitters to pay for this kind of services. So it's just a simple math as I see it. If, for example, emitting CO2 and paying for that emission, it's lower than the fee for capturing the storage, there is no incentive for the emitters to just commit on this long-term agreement.
Yeah.
So it's quite important to have in place, let's say, a scheme to help close this gap and make, let's say, storing CO2 commercially viable on its own. Because otherwise you cannot have a project when you don't have the demand for its service.
No, I think that's clear that you need to have some kind of support to at least spur the investment and meet that carbon price gap. Yeah.
To have like a market for the CO2, you have to consider all these intertwined elements like shippers' roles, market structure fit for purpose, and of course the supporting scheme, which in our view could be on the emitter side, because if you consider the infrastructure, for example, in our case, it helps a lot because it's to repurpose this infrastructure for CO2 storage. It's not capex intensive so much as compared to other projects all over Europe.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you,
Thank you.
Claudio, very much. Andrea, I mean, Claudio's highlighted a lot of the complexity from your perspective. If I listen to your colleague Hein, you like complexity. It keeps you in good work. But are you able to perhaps share a little bit your perspectives, particularly on the, I would say, the contractual side? In some of the feedback you gave, you were particularly talking about multiple contracting parties and this value chain complexity that Claudio's been talking about. But so I sort of hand it to you to give a bit of an overview of how you see it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the invitation and for being here. Yes, we as a firm, actually, we have been involved in some flagship projects in CCUS, in Northern Lights and Aramis in Netherlands. It's one of the two of the main projects, and the experience that we gain from that is that indeed they are very complex projects. The value chain is complex in the sense that there are several entities involved. One is the emitter, one is the pipeline operator, the other, and a different business entity is the storage operator. And each of them has its own business model, and each of them has its own financing. So that's different. That's important. Our experience is that yes, this requires very much complex contracts. And coming back to the contracts, long-term contracts between the emitter and the storage operator, tariffs being involved, but matching that also with the transportation contract in terms of duration and the price. The financing of these projects, at least in our experience, has not been as an integrated one, but rather because there are different drivers for each of these entities. The emitters, for instance, that their business case is basically they are not gaining any revenues from doing the carbon capture. They actually, their incentive for doing this is actually the ETS pricing scheme. There is a pressure on given by the ETS scheme and the price volatility of that. There is a cost for the emitting CO2 in the atmosphere. That price is volatile, it is changing. It is true that in 2026 there was much volatility around that. To the extent that price continues to be higher, then there is a incentive for doing the investment in the CO2 capture and storage project. For the storage entity, obviously the long-term tariff-based contract is the incentive. Let's put it like this. From our experience, at least, there is no pure project finance, no recourse in this type of project. It's usually some sort of combination of on-balance sheet financing with state support, state scheme. In both of the projects that we mentioned, that I mentioned earlier, there was a significant guarantee or undertaking from the respective state, from the Norwegian state in Northern Lights, from the Dutch state in guarantee, I believe, in the restructuring of Aramis. Probably you're more close to that. Yes, that's definitely needed. In terms of the one of the issues that we've seen in this project is the risk of leakage once the CO2 is deposited, that it stays there for a long time, for much longer than the life of the financing put in place for the storage operator or for even the corporate entity. So at some point in time, somebody, probably the state, needs to take over the liability for that. And it has been many terms vehiculated around like 20 years, how long that term should be when that can happen. There is insurance also in place for the same risk, but the insurance products available for this period of time is not that available. So that's where the state comes into place. So the jurisdictions where this was established through the legal framework. So that I'm coming back to the topic opened by Anne here about the legal framework. So this has to be somehow regulated in the legal framework. Yeah. In coming back to Romania, we do have a legal framework on carbon capture. It's an old, indeed, ordinance from 2011. Maybe it needs improvement in terms of the defining various concepts. What we still are missing is the methodological norms for permitting the access to the pipeline transportation grids from NRA. This is still not in place. Probably there are other methodological norms which still need to be implemented. Yeah, I think the legal framework should come after this. Complexities are solved, I would say, of the market.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you for you've very neatly identified, I think, several of the risks that are involved in developing these projects. And I'm interested to turn to my colleague Peter Paul, because Andrea, you mentioned indeed a number of these projects are not done on a project finance basis, and indeed the government's having to act effectively as the last resort and backstopping a lot of these risks. We have seen, Peter Paul, some projects done on a, let's say, a quasi-project finance basis, particularly in the UK. ING's been involved in those. Are you able to, I know we're now looking to other models, but are you able to kind of give some insights into what risk banks can realistically burden themselves and take, and what really needs to be put to either the emitters or effectively the regulatory regime to bear those risks? Yeah.
Thank you, Henry, and it's a pleasure to be here. So obviously, ING carbon capture alongside with, let's say, sustainable molecules is really the areas where we want to drive the energy transition, and we're really investing considerable time in
talking to project developers, talking to the governments. We're also part of, let's say, Carbon Management Europe, advising the European Commission around the bankability of these type of projects. We've now financed a number of different projects in the UK. You have the Northern Endurance Partnership, which is a project developed by BP and Equinor and Total. There's a project by Eni, HyNet, where we are now stepping into, and also in the US, which is a more of an integrated, let's say, ethanol capture, CO2 capture to injection project. So we are slowly seeing examples, but it's fair to say that most of the projects that we are seeing are financed on balance sheet by the larger developers. I think one of the challenges with carbon capture, and I call it a little bit the game of Tetris. I think we all played it when we were young. There's so many different blocks that need to fall into place to really start a project, and that really needs very strong guidance and involvement from regulators. Not saying per se, let's say, only on the financing side, but really coordinating parties, bringing emitters together with the project developers, shaping the policies, helping, let's say, with getting the licenses, etc. If you then look at how that has played out in other countries in Europe, there's basically two different systems. So in the UK government has said we want decarbonization as part of a revitalization of the industry. So they've allocated an enormous amount of money, more than 22 billion British pounds, to revitalize both the emitters, and to do that they are building, let's say, transport and storage infrastructure in place. And they understand it's very much a hub approach, selecting hubs where there's a lot of industry around it, and they are incentivizing the project to develop, but they understand the chicken and the egg issue which is there. Because ultimately an emitter, be it, and I know here also there's a number of projects that also received innovation money in Romania. The emitters, they will only invest if they are sure that, let's say, the transport and storage part of the project is also a part of it. So in the UK, they clearly said, look, we as a government, we will backstop the transportation and storage projects. We will guarantee that the volumes are there. And if the volumes are not there, we will reimburse you as a transportation and storage company. Obviously, I think that's regulatory framework is probably a step beyond what most of the other European nations want to implement. So the other approach we're seeing, especially in Denmark and in the Netherlands, where basically there's a subsidy regime where the emitter gets, on the basis of a CFD scheme, let's say the price differential versus the ETS price. So basically the cost price of their infrastructure that they would, and let's say it's 120 or 150 euros a ton of CO2, they will get the difference reimbursed versus the actual ETS price. And the ETS price at the moment, I don't have the latest, but it's hovering around, let's say, the 70, 75 mark. So you get that reimbursed as an emitter, because that's, let's say, you lost more. The other is in Norway, where basically the government has said, this is so important for our strategy, we will reimburse 75 to 85% of the capex of the initial project that is being developed. So that's Northern Light project. So obviously the developers, they're still taking risk, but a lot is being reimbursed. Is that a viable, again, strategy for other countries? Probably not. But they recognize that they need to de-risk these projects early on. But then the flip side of that, there's no money for second projects or third projects or fourth projects. So different approaches across Europe, but really it's about reducing the project-on-project risks that are between emitter projects and storage projects. And I think that's where a holistic view needs to come from. There are good initiatives coming out of Europe. Obviously, I know that the NZEA here in Romania is a little bit sensitive, the obligations, because that's creating, let's say, the demand side of the storage. But on the demand for, especially industrial companies, let's say the lead market concept where public procurement will need to buy green cement or green steel or green aluminium, that hopefully will drive demand for the CO2 storage at some stage, and kind of make sure that the price gap is being bridged.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I mean, it seems to me you've outlined a number of different schemes. You mentioned obviously UK, Denmark, and the Netherlands together, and also Norway. Slightly different methods of supporting these projects, but in the end, it's the government who are acting as the last resort in terms of a lot of these outsized risks, and to get these sort of projects off the ground, whether it's through direct capex support or whether through a CFD scheme. But in any case, it's all in the end goal of supporting these industries. In the UK, it's about, as you said, revitalizing heavy industry in certain regions, the oil and gas sector in Norway and Denmark. This seems very appropriate also from a Romanian context, with a sort of a very core sort of heavy industrial base, cement, lime production, steel even, that needs to be supported. I mean, does that resonate with you, Leonard, and in terms of, let's say, the support that will be given to supporting these industries with this kind of regulatory framework, in whatever form it is? Is that something that you recognize?
Actually, it's okay. Supporting, the financial supporting, it's important to all projects in this industry to capture, transport, and storage. But from perspective of authorities, we collaborated with government authorities such as energy minister, maybe financial minister, and others. About supporting scheme, yes, it could be, as mentioned, about CFD for carbon, but will be decision of government authorities, not national regulatory authorities. But national regulatory authority will implement secondary law legislation, in fact, and the mechanism will be established by government, and the methodology will be established by NRA. This is the point. In this case, we have a project now. It's a Dacian Petroleum project. I know about this, and we are involving to do and to supervise some information about the project, and at this period of time, as I mentioned before, it's necessary to increase the effort to exchange the primary law. In this matter, this is the point. Could be, but with support by ANRM PSG, this is another authority that is involved to storage of carbon dioxide and to do some authorization.
Yeah.
This is the perspective. And we'll see. Could be a good point to start to support. But another situation, maybe energy minister will be involved to open the modernization fund.
Yeah, okay.
This
okay.
is.
So, I mean, then, Ramona, Claudio, you're the ones developing the projects. It's clear that there needs to be a change to primary legislation, and with the regulatory support or the framework provided by UNRWA, what are we talking about in terms of sort of realistically timelines in terms of the projects that are being developed? I'm trying to get a bit more, specific in terms of timelines here now.
It's a very good question. It's a very good question.
Sorry to
for
force
us,
you into it.
And also to be able to respond right now, it will be very difficult. What I know for sure is that what is different, what is happening right now different comparing with the previous period, I mean 3 years ago, it is that right now what the stakeholders in the oil and gas industry are contributing to the primary legislation. This is something new, and not only them, also a company that will be affected by the new legislation that will take effect starting 2030. Yeah. So we have company from the refinery industry, we have company from cement, from chemicals. And we are working hard. We're really working hard. And we are seeing a huge progress also on the level of ANRM PSG because they are part of this project. We know that we are one of the company that we are ready to present the first document to apply for the first permitting and license for storage into Romania. I don't know when this will happen because it's a time framework that we cannot control. But I have to say that I appreciate the effort done by everyone in the last period of time. Maybe I will add something else. Probably part of you do not know that Dacian main pillar of activity is represented by the oil and gas extraction. We are doing oil and gas extraction. But we like to call it sunset. On the other side, we have the other division, which is called sunrise. And we are looking to the new technology. And we are on that stage that we know that the transition to the green energy, it's not anymore just a discussion. Will come, and it's coming over us. So we decided to invest a lot of effort in this project. It's important also to discuss about this project on the national level because Romania has a lot of mature field, oil and gas field, that can be reconverted to this kind of let's say, projects. It's true that we have also offshore project. I think that both options are available on the market right now. But on the other side, I think it's the responsibility of the authority to think and to decide which is better for the Romania at the end. Because at the end, if we like it or if we don't like it, here we are talking about a transition to the industry, to new industry. We are talking about new industry in Europe, but also new energy strategy for the future. We want to be part of this. We are contributing, and we hope that also the authority will make all the effort in the next future.
Okay, thank you very much, Ramona. That's clear. Claudio, I don't know whether you have anything to add from your perspective.
Yeah, just a few comments from my side. First of all, I would just want to, like Ramona said, I just want to confirm that we are, playing an active role in advocacy, and we have a strong team on this side, and we always have been, and we are always involved in the process, and we are helping the authorities and the government to, let's say, write a piece of legislation who actually can help every player on the specific market. Regarding in coming to your initial question, we are envisaging our project. Of course, we are still producing at plateau, and somehow the CCS project is following the involvement, let's say, of the reservoirs. And in this respect, we are envisaged to have for the CCS part an FID at around 2029. And of course, one could say that and could argue that it's still early for us to start the process, but we don't believe it. We believe that we need to start early to be sure that we're going to land this project correctly. And that being said, 2029, I believe it's a timeline which could have, let's say, all the necessary requirements to take a positive FID. And as usual, one of the most important, let's say, prerequisite for an FID is to have the regulatory framework in place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Nice to have a number on it, at least, to the extent possible. I won't hold you to it. I want to give the opportunity to the audience in case there are any questions. Juana, please. Do we have a microphone? If not, I can pass you one here.
Hello everyone, I'm from ING, Romania, and I have a question for Claudiu. Black Sea Oil and Gas is investing in upstream, but its green arm, Black Sea Oil and Gas Energy, is investing in biomethane, the subject of the first panel. Since you have this dual experience, what is your feeling if you look at these two technologies in terms of complexity, viability, support needed, and challenges, or whatever things that you want to share with us?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Anna. It's a good question indeed. And I would say that the green arm of Black Sea Oil and Gas is called BSOG Energy, and it's mainly its own purpose is to develop indeed biomethane projects in Romania. And maybe you already know that we promote this kind of projects from some time, and we have active projects right now. We are targeting to have around 5 projects. Our target, like usually, is to aim big and to have installed capacity around 200 megawatt of biomethane. It's an evolving, let's say, project and area of developing our business. We strongly believe in biomethane and Romania's potential on this side. I would just briefly give you some details about our first project, which is the most advanced one, and has a targeting FID date of let's say end of this year, hopefully. We have so this project. It's us teaming up with the biggest dairy farm in Romania. It's called Dian Agrar, and the idea of the project is to take the entire feedstock from their side. On which case we already signed a long-term agreement on that part, and to of course produce biogas and then upgrade it to biomethane, and then thankfully to the piece of legislation which came on stream in February this year, we can inject it into the grid. And I can tell you that although Romania has this big potential from commercial point of view, it's a matter of willingness of the clients to pay for this kind of project, for this kind of product, which is, as you know, expensive one. And we are not discussing only the calorific value of the gas, which is, everybody knows that it's still a high price in these days. But we are discussing of the
let's say, the green part of the revenue stack, which is called proof of sustainability plus the guarantee of origin. And on this side, I can tell you that there is a lot of interest for this kind of product from outside Romania. So the big players want to come here and to take the product. And based on this, okay, we have still in front of us some hurdles, but we strongly believe that biomethane it's a key element which could help Romania to diversify its energy sources, and of course to divert from gases and natural gas itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudio. Peter Paul, I don't know whether you have something to add.
No, is it working? Yeah. No, I'd like to make a few remarks, because and the interesting thing is that actually, and obviously this is a panel about carbon capture, but the biomethane route is a route we're seeing in, for example, in Denmark, that actually pays for the carbon capture and storage value chain. I think one of the good things about Romania is that the availability of stores for carbon capture is enormous. It's probably one of the largest availabilities within Europe, which means that you could actually become, let's say, a hub for a lot of the surrounding countries that actually do not have any storage. One of the other benefits is a lot of onshore storage. And the advantage of onshore storage is that the cost of storing CO2 is probably half of what it is for offshore. I'm not talking about, I think the case of OMV, Black Sea Oil and Gas is different because the infrastructure is very new. But if I look at other countries in Europe, typically onshore storage, we're talking about 30 to 40 euros a ton. Offshore, it's probably close to 60, 70, even going to 100 in some jurisdictions. Given the low storage cost, combination with the production of biomethane. Biomethane is purely, it's biogas coming from anaerobic digestion. You take out the CO2, and typically the CO2 is being vented without any utilization. But there are companies that are willing to buy CDRs and pay for the CO2 to be stored into stores, willing to pay 200, 250, 300 euros a ton, which then, if you look at the whole value chain, you can start, this is all biogenic CO2, this doesn't apply to, let's say, CO2 from industrial sources, but then you start having a kind of a value chain that pays for itself. Obviously, you still need to have the stores available, and I think that's where strong coordination is needed. And a good example is, for example, in Greece, where the Greek government, together with, let's say, emitters, they've gone to Brussels, said, as a kind of a coordinated group, said, we need support, we need European money to invest, to make this value chain happen. They got around 700 million, both for, let's say, the TNS projects, for emitters. It's a coordinated approach, and that doesn't, obviously the Greek government is then supplementing some of that with local capex funding, but most of it is coming from the EU. That together with, let's say, the EU decarbonization bank that is being set up, 100 billion funds, ETS money, Connecting Europe facilities, innovation fund money, 100 billion of available money that's being put together. There's a lot of money coming out of Brussels. The only thing is you need to have a good coordinated approach to tap into it, because at the moment it's a lot of individual projects that are going for it. But in the end, we know it's a political solution, and individual companies do not always have the right cloud to have that access. Yeah. So that's also where I think Romania really has a number of very good starting points to have the carbon capture value chain develop, but it needs coordination. And yes, the money doesn't always have to come from Romania itself. There are other pots of money, but it needs to be coordinated.
Yeah. No, thank you, Peter Paul. Plenty of food for thought for Anna as well in terms of the approach to be taken. I think we have a couple of questions over in the corner.
I'm sorry for coming back for some stupid questions.
Not at all.
I would like to come from a different angle. And personally, as a power engineer, I'm really scared to death to transport huge amounts of gas, say 4 billion cubic meters per year of natural gas from Black Sea, somewhere else in the western part of Romania, and then to store exactly the same quantity, because CO2 and gas are more or less the same thing, to transport it back somehow and to store it somewhere. This is expensive and risky. Expensive being Romanian money, EU money, Danish money, whatever is expensive. And complicated, regulatory, laws, everything else. So my question is the following for the esteemed panelists. We are struggling, you are struggling for geological storage. But I'm asking, what about biological storage? Because nobody, including European directives, will prevent me to store the same quantity of CO2 biologically, not geologically. And what does this mean? This means that, for instance, the only obligation for Romania is 10 million tons by 2030, 10 million tons of CO2 by 2030, which could be stored biologically, very easy, by 200,000 hectares, 200,000 hectares of a plantation, which needs to be processed in circular economy free of charge. So please enlighten me.
I leave it to the panel to...
I don't know if anybody else wants to report. So this is not about one solution versus another. I think we need everything. Yes, forest plantation, etc., is a necessary mean. However, that's temporary storage. A tree will grow, but it will fall down, and the CO2 will be released again. But I think the purpose of CCUS is more to prevent or actually capture, let's say, the CO2 from hard-to-abate sectors, especially cement, metal, green steel, normal steel, which are emissions that, as long as we need steel or cement, we cannot prevent. And if we want to decarbonize, let's say, our industry, our community, and want to prevent, let's say, the climate, more than the 2% increase in temperature, capturing hard-to-abate CO2 emissions is going to be key. I think the capturing in biological sources is an important element, but it's not the only element. And one of the difficulties with temporary capture in a biological source, it's very difficult to measure how much CO2 is actually being captured.
I'm sorry to say, but there are certified organizations which will do it. Otherwise, we will not recognize it. So that is a simple technical matter, and it's not a subject.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Perhaps something to be followed up afterwards as well, during lunch. I think, did we have one more question? And I think we have, we will be timed up, but thank you very much.
Everybody's going to hate me now. Hi everybody, my name is Gabriel Ignat. I represent Heidelberg Materials, one of the large producer of cement in Romania. thank you very much for mentioning the projects in Norway especially. You know very well that Brevik is at this time the only cement plant with a capture unit and actually operational capture and starting 2025 and storage also. I want to do a quick exercise with everybody in the room. How many of you know that today you can actually purchase cement with 0 direct emissions in Romania? Okay, not too many. Because we're speaking about CCS, so I would assume that more. Okay, but how many of you that know are willing to pay 5 times, 10 times more than what you're paying today for cement? How many times? It's good. I'm going to take you on the list. So the bottom line is that everybody speaks that, oh, the emitters will have to pay. It's not the emitters that pay at the end of the day. It's the market and it's the consumers of the hard-to-abate emitters. Whatever they're producing, if we're not investing, I can tell you that we did an analysis, I think it was last year, it was somewhere between 8 to 10 billion euros, the impact on the Romanian economy if we do not do CCS on cement alone, not other industries, only on cement. This until 2040. So this was a strict comparison between doing CCS and the investment and amortization and operational costs versus buying ETS allowances, which we estimate 130 euros 2030, and I think somewhere more than 200 euros to 2040. So that's a cost, that's a pass-through. We don't want to do it, no industry wants to do it, but the market forces us to do that because this is not a cost that you can basically intake it, right? And I do have also a question, it's not just marketing now to promote our Evo Zero product, but I have a question for all the panelists, and I think this is important for Romania because I've been in the CCS, let's say, or close to CCS starting 2010, and I participated to the implementation of the CCS directive in Romania and all that. I know I seem kind of young, but I'm not. The question is, we're all in the same bus, right? So we have oil and gas, we have the emitters, we have authorities, we have all that. My question is, who should be driving this bus in Romania? I don't think so. If you're going to leave cement drive it, you better just strap on for a bumpy ride. Well, the bottom line is, you know, Norway has definitely the government. But today, if we can say, well, it's up to the president of Romania, to the prime minister, because we run around, you know, splitting responsibility. Usually what happens is nobody is responsible. So we should have a driver. And I think, Claudio, you were the one with, hey, we need long-term contracts. Cement is a business that takes investment decision based on minimum 50 years limestone or whatever, you know, quarry and availability of raw materials. So you have a partner in us. We're used to that. We like long-term contracts, and, you know, this is what we do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Leonard, I don't know whether you want to take that. I mean, I think that the statement and the question is a good one, and it a little bit brings the conversation that we've been having full circle, because we've been talking a lot about, I think, the regulation and the different options and the theories of how we get this mark off the ground. You're very much focused on highlighting the commercial and strategic case for this industry, right? So, I mean, it will require some support, clearly, but there's also making the case that in the end you can pass on cost to consumers. We've also seen that, by the way, within green steel. It's a different sector, but of course, but there you had also OEM car manufacturers who are willing to pay that premium for that price. But Leonard, perhaps I give the final word to you to address that.
Yes. Okay, I try to respond to my colleague from Heidelberg Materials. Yes, the driver or bus, it's a lot of authorities, not only authority. ANRM PSG, ANRE, Environment Minister, Authority, National Authority of Environment, and other authorities. I guess it's similar with a ship by conduct by the captain, but second captain and other officers. This is the similar situation. in my opinion.
Okay.
Maybe
Yes.
if I may
Yeah.
make one closing remark, and sorry for stealing the thunder. The successful project, and you mentioned Aramis, where Clifford Chance is also involved. So we are also very close to that project. And what they do is a steer group, government, local, central government, local government, emitters, project developers, every week sit down, update. And, that is something that is being coordinated by the central government, being advocated. And why? Because ultimately people need to talk to each other. Hein, in the previous panel, he mentioned a good skill of a project developer is human skills, putting people together, understanding the issues and bringing everything together. And I think that is where it starts, but it needs a central coordination from somebody that can do it.
Thank you very much, Peter Paul. I think that's a very nice practical closing recommendation. So that just leaves me to thank everyone in the audience very much for your attention, for your interested questions. I found the topic very good to go through with all of you, and thank you very much to the panel for their insights. So thank you very much.